Hello and welcome to Tomlin's Harmonica podcast, where I'll be hanging out with players and teachers and having conversations loosely based around harmonica. This week's guest is one of the most versatile harmonica players on the planet. He's comfortable playing blues, country, funk, jazz, bluegrass, and many other styles. This versatility has led to him being featured on over 1,800 recordings over the past 40 years. I'm also pleased to call him a mentor of mine. Let me introduce you to Roly Platt.
Hi, Tomlin. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How about you?
I'm good. After that introduction, I better be really good, I think.
So you're currently in Canada, aren't you?
Yes, just north of Toronto.
How's it all look? I don't know if you're in a town or kind of out in the sticks. What's it like?
It's kind of the largest city is in Barrie, an hour north of Toronto. So it's like the largest city, 150,000. Largest city north of Toronto, I believe, certainly in this area.
And is it kind of complete lockdown like we've got here?
Yeah. We're not forced to stay at home, but because we're Canadian, we're trying to be nice.
Okay.
We've been asked to stay at home, and everybody's actually, it's quite amazing. I think that everybody is cooperating on this, and barring the odd idiot out there, but it's a bit of a shock when it first started. I'm sort of getting into the swing of things now a bit, but I know as bad as I think it is in my head sometimes, as I think of people that have it way worse than my situation with kids or with various things. So I wish everybody a good time through this period, and hopefully we come out of it not too far into the future.
Yeah, no, totally. That's kind of how I feel. I feel like I'm pretty fortunate in that I already work from home, so this isn't a massive culture shock. The only thing is, like, tons of my buddies have been calling up just to hang out, and they're like, "Yeah, let's just hang out on Skype because we don't have to work right now." It's like I'm still working.
I thought you meant hang out in person. I thought at least they're on Skype.
No, we're all being very responsible. I'm kind of impressed with how quickly people have been responsible, and there's kind of we're getting social shaming here if people aren't following the rules. Are you guys getting that over in Canada?
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's happening. Maybe more in Toronto, where you got a lot of people in one area, but there's really not much going on around here. Like it's you go out for walks and things and you see people. It's going to change as the weather breaks, which it's starting to do now. But no, it's been pretty good.
Yeah. That's good to hear. So how's it affecting kind of work and stuff? Because I as far as I know, you're mostly online with work things, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, music live stuff is gone for now, and that's for me. I can do tons of stuff at home, and we can all do, thankfully with the internet and all that's available. There's so much. I mean, we're very, very lucky to be in the spot we're in and have that technology. I think we'd all be dead by now by killing each other. Every household would be divorced, and but there's something about playing live that's completely different than anything I do at home, like recording wise, practicing, doing lessons, teaching, whatever it is. And I didn't discover this until maybe into my 50s, long story anyway, but around that time I started to appreciate what playing live does for me, and it has nothing to do with making money or anything else, although we all have to do that, and I enjoy it. But I encourage it. But it's that, I call it like an emotional release that you get when you're playing live, that you leave everything on stage. You just, play your ass off basically. And at the end of the night, you're physically tired, but you're emotionally I won't say empty like in a bad way. It's a good way. It's a release. It's almost like standing out in the street and screaming for 2 hours and just, everything, all the anxiety and stress and anger and all these other things in there, frustration, whatever is in there, comes out. And if I don't get that, I get a little wacky.
Oh man!
Just between you and me, I get a little wacky, and I can never figure out what it is. It's if I stop and look, I go, yeah, it's because I haven't been playing the last couple of weeks or like live, and so I have to find outlets for that. So that's my, I'm managing. I haven't cracked yet, but I've been close.
Yeah, so I know this feeling really well, and my wife actually recognizes it in me, and she'll get to a stage where she sends me out. She's like, go to a jam session. Just call some buddies up, play some. You have to play some music because you're driving me insane.
That's good. Yeah, well, it's good she recognizes it. It's interesting because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's funny though, because I it is incredibly frustrating right now not having that outlet. But I'm seeing already people are starting to channel that energy into other things. I think a lot of people are writing and feeling quite creative. Have you started channeling into other areas?
Well, in the sense of I've been doing a lot of things that I haven't had time for, or just not enough time to sort of dedicate to it, or whatever, different ideas and things. But yes, like one of the things is I'm trying to put together, as you know, because you were on the survey, but a harmonica seminar of some sort online for folks. So that's a good energy thing to put into. But there's things I put lots of energy into doing, and I'm happy to have the time to do that. But I don't know if I'll get the same. It's not a substitute for it, but maybe the actual doing of the workshops will give me an outlet of some sort, in a slightly different direction. There's no substitute. There's no direct substitute, but there's things that are certainly worth pursuing that are the next best thing.
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure you say it to your students. I say it to my students. Kind of lessons are kind of inconsequential if you can get time on stage. That's kind of the most important thing. Well, for the emotional side that you described, but also just you learn so much more.
Oh, absolutely. It's a different world. And when I'm playing at home, like even how hard I play when I'm practicing, and I think I'm playing, when I get into it, I think I'm playing pretty aggressively. And then I get on stage, and it'll often be like with a new harp that I've set up, and I've opened the reeds up a little bit so that I can attack it. I probably tend to play very hard, so I set them up to accommodate that. And then I get on stage with it a week later or something, and I choke it out in 2 seconds because I'm playing that much harder on stage. But yeah, you're just on the subject of learning how to play. When you practice at home and practice to songs on your computer or whatever, however you do it, you're in a very controlled environment, and you're used to all the sounds and how things sound and all those things around you, your environment. When you get on stage, the environment, I mean, especially, well, anytime. If you're in a band, you're playing different clubs all the time or different venues. So the sound is completely different. The stage is huge one day, small the next day, like incredibly small, some of these places. You have to accommodate, change everything for that environment. The sound on top of that is like 10 times as loud as you're used to hearing. Suddenly you can't hear that great amp you bought, and you're trying to turn it up to 7, and it sounds like a transistor radio. All those things throw you off playing wise, and then when you're jamming with a band, they're not doing the song the way the Muddy Waters record is at home, right? They didn't sing that extra verse, or they don't, they do it completely differently.
Yeah, I remember chatting to you about this during one of our lessons, and Just to be clear, Roly was giving me lesson. But you said that being on stage is like being in a war zone, and I think that has stuck with me every time I've gotten up on stage since you said that. I was like, shit, this is exactly what it's like, because there's all the training that you do at home, all the practice, and then if you're lucky, the rehearsals you do with a band, and then everything's just so different, and all the stuff that you meticulously practiced over and over, all the stabs and the hits, it all goes out the window, and hopefully you're kind of praying that 80% of it is still there, and then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. I mean, it's not supposed to be that way, but because it's in real time and you can't stop. Okay, everybody stop in the middle of a song. I need to move my amplifier a little bit so I can hear it better. Or I need to stand over here so I don't get feedback, or whatever the situation is. It's you just have to do it, even in that crappy sound. Like, you kind of hope it's coming out front. I mean, I spent half my career playing, not liking what I'm hearing on stage, but praying that the sound man has got a clue and is making you sound good out front. And as long as I know I'm coming out front, I'm good. I've had nights where you're playing some big club or something, place is packed, and you're having a really good night. You're just into it. You're locked in. You're playing. You're feeling good about it. And you're sweating, and you get off stage, and somebody comes up to you and goes, "God, I couldn't hear you at all."
Oh, I hate that.
This is after an hour and 15-minute long set or something, and it's like, oh, for Christ's sakes. That didn't happen too often, but that's that's the difference of playing in that, and you learn very quickly, how to do that on the fly and make the best of what you've got. And having said that, there's other times where you're very fortunate to be in a situation where it sounds great. You're on a big stage, like a theater type of thing, or it doesn't have to be, but just a nice open area where you got a little breathing room on stage. And the players, there's a couple of people I play with that are particularly like this, very sensitive to volume and letting the music breathe. So everybody's got their little spot they play, and they're incredibly disciplined in staying not too loud and leaving room for people to do a little. Somebody hits one little kink on the piano, you can hear it, and we play around each other that way, and it's amazing, right? It's those nights are great. It's a huge contrast from the thrashing and full bore kind of stuff that you get in other situations.
Yeah, it's so true. I had a complete revelation of an experience last year. I did a gig exactly as you described, kind of in a theater with a really big stage, and the on-stage sound was non-existent. Everyone had in-ear monitors. Oh, yeah. And it was kind of strange, because if you weren't wearing monitors, you had no idea what was going on unless you were in the audience. But if you were wearing monitors, you had everything you needed, and it was just so liberating, and I could think about the volume and the dynamics in every note that I was playing, rather than I just want to be heard, I just want to be ego, but having that kind of sweetness of the note goes from kind of 0 to 100, and there's that whole spectrum that's kind of fabulous. And I know you, like, I've listened to you play a ton as a kind of accompanist as well as a soloist, and you're playing all these really light, subtle things in the background that if it's not coming through, if it's not being projected well enough in the mix, are lost. But they're so sweet. They're such nice little subtleties.
Yeah, and you can't. It just reminded me as you're saying that I spent probably 20 years of my live career or whatever playing in situations where you can't do any of that. It's goes from don't play to play as hard as you can. Yeah. Just to sort of make that little lick you do cut through what the volume of the stage is, right? And when it changed for me, or when I started to appreciate the differences, when things like house concerts and small concerts where people would pay $20 a head or something to come in and see. You get 40, 50, 60 people, those type of shows where it's, usually a smaller unit. It could be a duo or a trio. And you could hear a pin drop. Everybody's there to listen to the music, so there's no sound. They're just sitting there quietly waiting for you to play. And literally every note you play and every sound you make is you're presenting them. They hear everything. And it was like, wow. Like, I mean, you better be on your game playing wise, because it's you can't hide in anything, right? And so you actually approach it more. It's almost like being in a studio type of thing, where everything, if you're in the studio, you change how you play. And that's a problem for a lot of people. A lot of musicians don't know how to adapt to that or whatever, but it changes how you play, because it's forever. Everything you do is marked forever. And so you don't, all the stuff that you put in that isn't necessary or is too much or distracting from what else is going on, you have to leave it out and just filter through the stuff that's really the best stuff, and you got to sort of, but it's the same way in those little concerts. It's the same approach.
Yeah, it's I guess it's nice having the variety, and like that gig in the theater was as memorable as the next gig I played, which was literally on the back of a farm trailer, like outdoors, 7-piece band, one monitor. I was singing and playing harmonica, but even then it wasn't important for me to hear myself, because there were horn players who wanted to pitch correctly, and it was total chaos. And I have no idea how we sounded out front. I know that I couldn't hear anything, and it wasn't as fun. Well, it wasn't that it wasn't as fun. It wasn't as satisfying emotionally, but it was so exciting having that experience of kind of big outdoor festival kind of thing with, flying by the seat of your pants, as it were. The variety is cool.
No, it is for sure, and it's good, and it's different skill sets, as you mentioned, like being able to play when you can't hear, and you're really playing in your head of what is gonna work, and you kind of hope that it sounds good, but you go by instinct more, I think, than than some of the things. It's pretty cool though when you do have the luxury, however, whatever the situation is, where you truly can start experimenting and hear all the things that you're doing, all the detail that you're doing. It's all in the detail. And when you step outside of your comfort zone and try new things or whatever, you need to be able to hear the music around you to be able to do that. So that situation isn't always current. Isn't always the thing happening.
It's true. It's true. And that's something that always makes me feel a little bit apprehensive when I know that students are going to have their first moments on stage, and you kind of think that so much of their future enjoyment is contingent on that first experience being at least okay.
Right.
And it so rarely goes perfectly according to plan, because there are so many things that you don't practice for. You don't practice for playing with a monitor or having an amp on stage that's loud enough for the audience to hear, but also loud enough to feed back if you're standing right next to it. So you need to think about that, and then you can't hear yourself, but you can hear the drums. And how do you prepare for that as a student? It's quite a big ask.
Yeah, I had an older brother that played a little bit, and he'd wheedle his way into these. He'd get up on stage with a couple of bigger bands. He didn't earn the musicality to do that, but he sort of pushed his way, talked his way into it. But he got up with a Canadian band called Crowbar, which was a huge band, and this would have been in the 70s. And he gets up and he's all excited. It's one of his favorite bands, and the guy gives him the mic and he plays a song, and he gets off stage and talks to the singer and Kelly J, and he says, he goes, I couldn't hear a thing when I was playing harp. And Kelly says, how do you like it? Didn't bat an eye. Like, yeah, that's how it is every night.
Yeah, but I mean, you get used to that with experience, and I mean, you've done so much. You've done so much touring and so much recording. Um, like that must have been, well, touring must have been the best education ever to kind of get
On many
comfortable.
levels, on many levels, not just harmonica wise. Yeah, touring's tough. I see people. I haven't toured in quite a few years now. I've stayed local and done the odd thing, but nothing like I used to. But I look at people out there doing it now that are either still doing it, people close to my age or at least my age. Um, and you can't tell, I guess, over the radio, but I think I'm 61 or 62. I forget now. That's what happens when you get older. You start, I think I'm 62. But I see people that, younger people and guys that have been doing it still. It's a tough go. It's a lifestyle. It's a complete different lifestyle. So but the experience of it is great. Like I wouldn't trade it for the world. Um, the musical experience, the people you meet, but there's a huge price you pay for doing that because you're away from home all that time. You lose a lot of stuff. You kind of get into that becomes normal after a while, the road. And if you're not on the road, you're almost uncomfortable. You get so used to it.
Yeah, I've got pals who got into the touring lifestyle, and they couldn't deal with being home, and they lived for being on the road. They didn't realize that they lived for being on the road until they got home, and
Yeah.
then they were so uncomfortable being stationary that it was kind of weird to see that transformation. Because from my point of view, I have this really whimsical desire to go on, a 2 week tour every year and stay in 5-star hotels and play lovely theaters with audiences who listen.
Wow, what a great dream that is.
Right? But I don't want to do it for more than 2 weeks a year, and I probably want to take my wife with me and just make it very comfortable. And I realize that tours like that don't exist, and I wouldn't make any money.
Yeah, I mean they exist at certain levels. The better the 5-star stuff and whatever. But it's usually a real mixed bag. You get some of those gigs if you're lucky. You get some. It depends on the level of music business you're in. But for most people in the blues world or that end of things, and you're traveling like that, it's you get one or two or a few really nice gigs and meet some amazing people for sure. But you also, have to accommodate and play these smaller venues. You're a star one night and the next night you're playing this place and you go, how did I get here? But that's the nature of the business, and it always was that way, right from my first gigs to all the way through. It's yeah, but hey. I got into it because I like to play. That was my motivation. I love to play, and I love to be standing on stage playing. That's it.
Yeah, that's cool. Was there a moment when you kind of thought, shit, this is everything I wanted? Like I have the lifestyle, the
Yeah, my first gig.
awesome.
I not my first gig, but just to give you a bit of background, I literally bought myself a harmonica on my 17th birthday as a gift to myself, I guess. My older brother, as I mentioned, played a little bit. He wasn't really very musical, but he had great taste in music and knew what was good. He just didn't come as natural as it did for me, I think. But within a year and a half, just over a year and a half after picking up the harmonica, and I didn't play anything else, I was playing professionally. I lucked out and met somebody in Toronto, and he was in a band, and he talked to them, and they hired me. And so it went from nothing, like from sitting in, trying to sit in with people, like cut high school and go out to see these Canadian bands in Toronto. And the music scene was really good back then. So there was lots of options, and try and sit in with them, just hang out, just listen. And then, playing professionally. But my first out of town gig, the first gig was in Toronto, I guess. And then the next week, I think we were out of town in some little town. And we played back then, and I miss these days, I'll tell you. We played 6 nights a week, every week. Every gig was 6 nights. It wasn't a one-nighter as they are now. And it's a real shame because you play 6 nights straight with the same guys and in the same club. So those things we were talking about the sound and, not loud enough and adjusting things, you got a whole week to play around with things and get it the way you want, or just get used to it, right? But you get tight because you're playing together, the same people all the time. Like these days, you play in a unit, and often the drummer is different than the last time you played, or the bass player is different, or 2 guys are different, because everybody's doing different things, and it's hard to keep the same people. But then you were a band, and you would play a gig a week, and then you'd go to the next town and play another week. But anyway, the end of that first week, I was just in my mind, I don't remember the actual week too much, but at the end, Saturday night comes, and the leader turns around and he goes, "Here you go." And he gave me $180. This would have been back in the mid 70s or late 70s, maybe. $180 in my hand, and I had completely forgotten that you get paid. I was so happy just to be doing it. And that kind of sets the tone for why I'm not a rich man today. And it hasn't changed much, other than I never forget to get paid now. But I just remember that sticking out in my head, that I went, oh yeah, and you get money for this too. Like, it was like, holy cow, this is like the greatest thing. And that's the best way to approach it, because if you're going into this thinking you're going to be a star or you're going to be rich, you can go back to sleep and finish that dream.
It's so true, and I think it's really easy to lose sight of that. I remember years and years ago, I was going to go busking with one of my friends, because I started out by busking every day for a couple of years, which was quite an education. And I arrived at our busking spot, and he asked me how my day was going, and I was like, "Oh, dude, it's terrible. I mean, this morning I had a recording session, and then I had to teach for a couple of hours, and now I'm doing this." And he was like, "Dude, you've just described the perfect musical day." And I was like, shit, this is so true. But I've been so used to talking to my civilian friends about their jobs, and everyone always kind of says, same shit, different day. And I was so used to hearing that kind of negativity around work that I'd forgotten that I love that lifestyle of doing something musical, be it recording, teaching, playing, being able to do that every day. And the money, the money's never big, but it's a lot easier to get to have a smile at the end of the day if you're doing that. But
have you ever, let me ask you something, have you ever done a day job of any kind, like for any length of time, other than the odd thing?
No, not for any length of time. I'm totally unemployable.
Okay.
Psychologically speaking.
Yeah, congratulations. I find that's a great experience to have, because all of a sudden, when you're doing this crappy job at $7 an hour or whatever it is, you realize, and no one gives a shit about who you are or who you think you are as a musician. I've been through that, and suddenly you realize, geez, playing's not so bad. It's a whole different mindset. I mean, obviously, if you're doing it, everything's a trade-off. I think, a compromise of some sort. So with playing, you get all the things that we've been talking about, which is huge. The money's probably not going to be very good. and the uncertainty, insecurity of the business and all that is always there. So you get all that stuff with it. And so you give up a lot as a musician, as a full-time musician, often financially and security wise, that when I see other people that have been working for 10 or 15 years in some other field, they've got, um, they've got some toys, the nice car, or maybe a boat, a place up north or whatever. You got money, and it gives you the freedom to buy that nice amplifier that I always wanted, as a harmonica player. They've got two of them, that type of thing. But they work their ass off for that usually, and they give up a lot of the, they're taking on a lot of stress and things like that we don't get as musicians. Our stress is, worrying about the next gig or money or something like that sometimes, but beyond that, it's not an overly stressful business, that's for sure. Not from what in comparison to some of the other things I've done.
No, I've not lasted at any kind of job prior to being a musician. I remember vividly I did a trial shift as a kitchen porter when I was 21, 22, and that was the year that I discovered that I could take my guitar out on the street and sing and play guitar and make money. And I did the trial shift. And they wanted to hire me because they said, "Wow, you're a really hard worker," and I'd just gone out and made my first, I don't know, 20 pounds over 4 hours. So that's like $6 or $7 an hour. Not a huge amount. And I was just like, no, there's no way that I'm staying up till 3 a.m. cleaning up in a kitchen when I could be going out on the street and playing guitar.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I think those experiences are important because it puts things. If you're only doing you're living that one world. You have no idea. You bitch about stuff, or you get complacent, and then you lose that, and you're forced into or choose to go in a different direction. Suddenly, that you see all the things that you didn't appreciate so much that now you do, and that's what happened to me. I saw music in a different light again. I kind of saw it again like I did in the beginning, and that was nice to sort of rediscover that.
So you've taken some time out with a I'm going to use air quotes with a real job in between music.
Well, yeah. I mean, I had a lifestyle change at about 35 years old, a drastic one, and which required, or not required, but I chose to not go on the road anymore and kind of stay closer to home. But at the same time, the economy had gone down the tubes. There was the financial crash in the 80s and or 90s, I guess, early 90s, and work dropped. That's when things started really changing in the business, and at least in the bar business and club scene, where it went from 6 nights down to 3 nights first, or 4 nights maybe. Then it went down to 2 nights. Then it went down to one-nighters, a Friday and a Saturday. And the first thing to go out of a band was an extra instrument, So if you didn't play 7 instruments, you're not going to get hired. So bass players did all right, drummers did all right, guitar player. But anything beyond that was luxury, and harmonica was certainly in that category. And so work dried up, and long story short, I battled with, because all I ever knew how to do was play harmonica. Even in a music business, that's all I knew how to do. I didn't even expand within. Took a very purposeful, narrow focus, which I'm paying the price for these days. If I had have expanded, I would have been better off. But that's how it was. So but basically I had to make a decision, a very hard decision, to mentally leave music and focus on a whole different direction. And I went back to school and took basically computer graphics is a general term for it, but it was everything to do with, computer graphics and design and things like that. And then 2 years of that full time. And then I started sort of just teaching myself through various methods and doing work for people, learning that craft. still playing all through this, but not playing, not pursuing it. Just, people that I knew would hire me for gigs and things. So I was always playing, but mentally my focus for the first time in my life was as dedicated to that as it was to harmonica originally. And that's when, like I said, you learn that, hey, this is hard work. As much as I liked it in the beginning, that became, I became relatively good at it. Not amazing, but okay. But the pressure that comes with some of those jobs is like 10 times anything I experienced playing wise. And that became stressful after a while. And I've kind of let go of that. Now I do both, but I revisited the music after that, having had that experience. But that helped me a lot. I got to buy that second amplifier.
Oh man.
Like literally going from years ago from, being so broke that I can't even describe. I can describe to you, but I won't. But being so broke that, it's insane. Like I could tell you stories that you'd go, really? It was that bad? Yeah, it was that bad. For various years throughout my playing. Very, and part of it was my own doing, because I probably had opportunities to make money on the side doing something else, like most normal people would. Oh no, I'm a musician. damn it, I'm going to starve to death, but I'm not doing a regular job, because that would be betraying my passion, which is bullshit, but it worked for me at the time anyway.
Yeah, it's a funny journey that I think well, almost all the musicians I know who have made it stick have had to go through. I mean, I remember leaving school, and my teachers were so disappointed when I said to them that I was going to be a musician. Because I'd done okay at school. They wanted me to be some kind of scientist, and I had no interest. And they said, okay, so are you going to like be in a wedding band and do covers and stuff? I was like, hell no. I'm going to play original music. And they said, oh well, I assume you're going to teach then. I was like, no, I'm going to be a creative musician. That's all I'm going to do. That's all I believe in. And then, I got my first covers gig, and I was like, this is great. People actually like the music I'm playing because they recognize it. That's cool. And then I accidentally fell into teaching English, actually, before I started teaching music, and realized that I loved it, and that was cool. And I've not written music in years and years, and that doesn't make me sad at all. I'm happy that I'm doing musical stuff. And that there's this kind of mixed farming approach of you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you don't have to be the completely pure musician who stays true to their art in order to call yourself a musician.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point, because again, there's a trade-off for all those things, and I've had to accept that fact that I would love to be the guy traveling across the country and doing these things, like like I used to, I guess, or whatever. But the things that go with those choices are you have to consider that. Like, you can't just look at the little slice of the pie that you think, yeah, I really want that, and I'm not getting that now. So how do I get that? Well, to get that, you have to accept all these other things around it. So being more at home and doing a variety of different things allows you to be in that business and still have a somewhat of a normal life around that too, which is it's a big deal. That's what I found after touring for all these years, traveling on the road for all those years. Just like being on stage, they're a little too long.
All right, so let's go off in a very slightly different direction, because you said that you had a very narrow focus in as a musician, and I kind of want to call you up on that, because I feel that you could maybe argue that it's narrow because of picking one instrument, but you're incredibly versatile on an instrument that a lot of people tend to keep as almost a one-trick pony.
Like that.
That's the one. That's the one. But you know, you play tons of styles that loads of people would be too scared to even approach on harmonica. Like how did you make that work?
So coming from that blues and maybe a little bit of bluegrass, kind of a little bit eclectic background, but mainly blues. The band was country based. We did a lot of swing, Sleep at the Wheel, and then we do like an Allman Brothers tune mixed in there, and then we do traditional country as well. And I hated traditional country. I just didn't get it, right? And they loved it. And the same guys that liked playing the Allman Brothers tune liked this old country stuff, and they knew, about it. And I didn't know anything about it and didn't want to know anything about it. But I'm in the band, so I got to play this stuff. So I was saying that 95% of the music we played didn't have harmonica in it in any of the songs. So suddenly you've got to figure out, what to do in these tunes. And there's nothing to go by. If you listen to the original, there's no harp in it. Then there's not even harp in a similar type of tune. These were just, oddball songs that had nothing to do with harmonica. No reference. So, and I didn't have, I guess the closest references I had was like Mickey Raphael with Willie Nelson. Later on, Norton Buffalo, with his kind of eclectic styles. But there wasn't a lot of that going on. So you just kind of, I'd listen to what another instrument would do. Like we had a steel guitar player in the band in the original version. So I'd listen to what he would do comping. He would sit, and I'm doing it with my hands like anybody can see this. But he would just, when he wasn't playing fills, he would go chuck, chuck, chuck on the strings on the steel guitar as a rhythm part. And he would tell me, that's what I'm doing. And I'm playing on the offbeat 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 in these tunes. So I would kind of do that on the harp. I'd listen. At one point we had a fiddle player in the band. So I would, listen to how he would do things in the, not fills, but more backgroundy chording kind of notes and long notes and things, and try and emulate that. So I wound up trying to emulate other instruments, I guess, is the big takeaway, or the thing I learned how to do is just listen to what's happening in the original song. Well, there's a saxophone on the original song. So what can I do that would fill that spot sonically in the song? But what it did was gave me a variety. I started learning, little tricks and little things to emulate other things, so sound a little different than your average harp player, I guess, or a blues player. But it also started forcing me to listen to melody more. And it took a long time. I listened to some stuff that I did back then. I found some old cassette tapes that we did when I was like 20 or whatever. And I was hoping I was really good, but I wasn't. I'm listening and I'm going, like, some of it was okay. And some of it was like, oh, Jesus, like you're not even playing the changes there at all. But it set the stage for appreciating musicality. Because in that style of music, it's not just about licks and things like that, and attitude and that type of hard playing. It's about playing the right notes and playing over changes that aren't typical 3-chord changes, and how to place those things into a song where you're not necessarily like you're a sideman, like you're an instrument within the band. Within the music, and how to fit that in. I mean, that applies to blues as well, but there's more liberties taken in blues, I would say, than some of this other stuff. It like I said, it set the stage for exploring other things, and I love now trying to find Well, I mentioned I got into design and graphic design, and one of the things in graphic design is logo design, and I done a fair bit of that work. And the thing with logo design is you take, a sort of a complicated message and simplify it into the simplest possible little shape with a little idea in that shape. Like, oh, isn't that clever? Those two things make a letter, tell you something about the business. But you do it in the absolute simplest way. Having done that in graphic design, when I went sort of focused back on music, I realized it kind of taught me more about music than I knew before from doing it in design, is my point. And music, I approach that way now. Try to say whatever the complicated thing is that you can do, but try to simplify that to the most effective combination of notes that gets that idea across. I don't know how to explain how it does that, but when you get it right. And that's the coolest thing to me, is to find. I like playing fast and complicated, and I do it all the time, but I also get just as much joy going the opposite way of just finding the perfect thing to play in that spot, that one little note or that one sound or that line that adds, that's a musical line. It's nothing to do with showing off on the harp. It's just the right thing to play musically in that spot in the tune.
Yeah, I remember you saying that the song is king, and I think that really sums it up perfectly. It's this idea of you are there to service something other than your ego. You're there to make the music sound better by being a part of it rather than sitting on top of it.
Exactly.
And that's what I really like about your playing, and that was something I was really excited to work on with you when I did some lessons with you. And I remember telling my students that I was getting lessons from you, and they were saying, "Oh, well, what are you learning?" And do you have some licks to show us? And I was like, no, I'm playing on the offbeat for 5 minutes. And they just didn't get it.
Yeah.
But it was a game changer. It's that thing of kind of building up the stamina, stuff that I would have done really comfortably on guitar, but never worked on doing on harmonica.
Well, look at it this way. If you were another instrument, like a drummer or a bass player, say, I mean, they play, if they're good, they're playing quite simple in roots-based music. I mean, there's obviously other styles of music where there's more going on. But in a 3-chord song, a country tune, say, or a blues tune, they're playing very simple. And if they're really good, that's what they do. Their meter and the pocket that they play in with each other and in their own spot is perfect, but the notes they play are dead simple and they're repetitive. Like you'll hear the drummer playing that same pattern, every verse or whatever it is, and so other instruments have been doing that for forever. Great players. Harmonica, it's a real treat to let yourself be like that in a tune. Like, so there's tunes that you get featured in and, you go nuts in or whatever. And then there's other tunes where you're not so important in that song, and that's okay. So get into that, right? Get into the fact that you're a little bit of, you make a cake and then you sprinkle a tiny bit of sugar just around the edge or something, just a little decoration or whatever it is. Be that in that song. Be that little tiny thing in that song. That little tiny thing, if it's any bigger, spoils the rest of the cake, right? So you want to be just, you want to add to it a tiny bit. And if you can do that, your other musicians will welcome you to the stage. It doesn't matter, how high a level of player you are. If you have that knowledge of what's appropriate in a tune, you'll be welcome on almost any stage because you're not going to fuck them up. and nobody likes that. Nobody likes to feel like, I hope he doesn't, get in my way in this part. I've been practicing this part, and we've got this beautiful thing we do where we sing harmony in this chorus, and I bet he's going to play over that because he's not listening. And if you listen, you go, you know what? There's 3-part harmony going on there. Shut up. Don't play. Let them soar there. And then you come in with a little thing at the end or something, like you just have to be aware of all those things. There's other stuff going on.
Yeah, but it's scary because I think a lot of musicians assume that they're being paid by the note, and they think, shit, if I'm not playing, then I'm probably not earning my keep.
Yeah.
But then if you watch, like I love watching horn sections because so often you'll see that they don't play. That they'll play on 20% of a tune and they'll make that tune just with what they've added in that 20%. But if they played all the way through and you had big brash brass, then you would lose that killer stab that came in on the 5 or whatever.
Exactly. Too much of anything dilutes the whole thing, right? And for sure, that's a good example. The horn players and while we're talking about that, I mean, what horn players don't do, or and maybe shouldn't, I don't want to encourage them, is to play rhythm of any kind, right? They don't play any. Although I played with a couple of guys that see me doing it, and they try and do it on the sax as well, and I don't think it works too well. But one of the things that I do, and it came from. Not from the right motivation, but it was because I like watching that steel player. I'm standing there doing nothing like the sax player or the horn section does, and I didn't like it. I don't like just standing there. And I watched the steel players doing stuff. He's moving around. He's doing a little note here or there. He's doing a long note he'd hold, or the fiddle player would do something. They had found places to add things in that weren't really fills or anything. Like people could still do stuff on top of that, but it was part of the beds, right? The rhythm section. And so I started doing little things. Again, I'm doing my hands again. Don't see my hands. I talk with my hands too much. But doing little rhythm things, chuck, on the offbeat, or more complicated things, or listening to my biggest influence back when I was learning was Butterfield, and listening to things he would do in tunes without playing fills or solos. He would do little comping things that almost sound like organish, or just rhythmic, little cool little, very simple but cool little counter rhythmic things to a tune. That's what I started doing, and I sort of learned how to do it by wanting to do something on stage when I wasn't playing. I didn't really care if people could hear it that much, but I was sort of experimenting with things. And then when I found something that actually fit, I would bring it up in volume a little bit or whatever. But I've been doing that for years, and I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to participate without doing a lot of stuff and without being the featured thing. I don't want people sort of listening to me over the singer or anything, but as part of it,
Yeah, I think it's almost kind of the most respectful way that you can play with other musicians, because I'm sure you've had this experience, but like people who come up to a jam session and you start explaining to them, what the song structure is, and then they're like, oh no, I don't need to know that. I just play lead. And you think, what? I mean, I've spoken to guitarists like this, and I'm like, if you want to play lead, you're going to have to play rhythm for 90% of the song at least. Otherwise, you're not going to get a solo.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love your. I mean, I love all your playing, but the rhythm stuff is what really sticks out to me. Just because so many harmonica players sing where you're playing rhythm. So that's their way to service the song. They're singers,
right.
And then they take a lead break, and they might back up the guitarist a little bit, but very few harmonica players play from the beginning of the song to the end of the song and service the song. And I think that's something that a lot of people can learn from. And yeah, it would make them infinitely more employable as much as anything else.
Well, and the one of the nicest compliments I've gotten is in the studio in particular is I've done things like just that little sounds like that, or little pops and things rhythmically through a tune. And the producer or the artist will say like, geez, I didn't even know harmonica could do that. Like I didn't even know that was an option to have rhythmic things happening, because when you put it into a mix, it actually, because it sounds organic sounding, like it doesn't sound like a I don't know what to compare it to, but it's got its own interesting little tone to it, and in the right place. It's almost like a, congas or something, like if you're doing those little pops and things, but it's not, right? It has its own tone. So you don't really know what you're hearing even. If you're listening, when you listen to the final mix, there's just this little thing in there, and it gives that organic quality. Like, what is that? A piece of wood? Is it is a guy tapping on something? Or, but anyway, if you get, somebody pointing that out or just becoming aware that it's something new to them, that was nice on session work.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I think that's such a killer thing that you do. How did you find making the transition? This is me about to plug your album, by the way, because I absolutely love it. Because your album has a ton of lead playing, as it should, because it's showcasing you.
Well, it actually has 3 CDs worth of harmonica on that one CD.
Okay.
So you're getting it's like buying 3 CDs of harmonica.
Oh, wow, 3 for the price of one. That's brilliant.
I don't think I should be bragging about that, but yeah.
Well, it's a great CD, and I'm going to put it in the show notes so people know to check it out. But yeah, some highlights that I think people will have heard before, things like "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" and songs that aren't kind of traditionally harmonica songs that you've really owned and done something very special with.
Thanks.
Very, very cool.
Thank you.
Are you working on new material?
Sure. Sure I am. To be honest, I'm working on new stuff, but not necessarily for the purpose of that of doing another CD. I mean, to be honest, the recording, the doing CDs business has changed over the years, and I'm the first one to recognize that, like, it costs a lot of money to do it the way I would like to do. If I did one, I'd probably scale it down a bit and make it a little more affordable. But I spent a fair bit of money on that CD. A really top-notch studio, hiring all the players and rehearsing, whatever, the whole process of it. And it's hard to get that money back. I certainly have, made money on it, but it's what I think of when I think of doing one is you should know like, why are you doing it? If it's to try and make money, then you better think it through and figure out how you're going to make money doing it. Like, if you're not, well, the first thing that happened with my CD was people, and I knew it was going to happen. They said, so where are you playing? Where can how do we hire you for this festival? And I'm like, well, I don't really have a band, which I didn't. This was all assembled for that CD, for that purpose. The people I used are people that I play with regularly, but they were assembled for that project. So I didn't have a show, I did a couple things like that, when I first did the CD. But I realized very quickly that unless you're going to, that becomes like somebody in the Canadian business, music business, said CDs are now like a very expensive business card for musicians. This is what I do. Call me. I just I'd have to have a purpose in mind, something specific. But I would probably go, do something, more scaled down. scaled down size wise as far as musicians, more acoustic, smaller unit, and and try a little different approach as far as recording as well, rather than the big expensive studio. Try and do it on a little more of a budget, but still get a great quality out of it, and use that to promote something I was doing. So that's very much a possibility. There's somebody I'm working with now, although it's been put on hold because of this Corona stuff. But we've been talking about doing something like that. So I would do it in conjunction with some sort of promotional thing, live playing, use that to promote something else. But just, I would love to do it. I'd love to have the money to just go, I'm going to do another CD. And I know people that have the money and do that. And it's a wonderful luxury to be able to do that. But there's so many other things that there's different things I'm involved in now that I, can't do everything. So I'm not going to do a million recordings just for the sake of doing them, because I'm not out there touring.
That's fair. Well, I hope you do an album sooner rather than later, just because I enjoy listening to them so much. But that's not a good business reason to do it. So wait until it makes sense for your career. But I'll be very excited to get my hands on it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned that you might be working on some online workshops. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? This is the point to plug your new stuff.
Sure. It's in its beginning stage right now, but I mean, I think I put out a little survey and got some great feedback from people, trying to find out what people would be interested in learning in particular, and what's sort of the most popular, and geared around that. And what I'm finding is, I think what I'm going to do is, rather than try and do a catch-all, and I'm going to call it a seminar, because a workshop to me is a little more interactive, like an in-person workshop where you can pause and people can try stuff and you can address. This is online, so I mean, realistically, it's more of a seminar where you're presenting material and demonstrating and things. There would be, some element of interactivity to it, but not as much as there would be in person. That's the trade-off, I guess. You probably know more about all that than I do, but that would be my take on it.
Definitely.
So what I'm trying to do is break it down. I'll probably do a beginner's, if you're relatively new, not to say brand new, but relatively new to harmonica, just cover the basics of, through my experience of to get people on the right road, demystify some of the things that people don't understand, and put them on the right path to learning. And that's how I got started, is somebody showed me the basics and put me on the right path, and then you go and practice. And then do topics after that, where, you might do third position and some other subject, combine the two topics per workshop. If anybody's interested in learning more about it, if you go to, everything I do is basically on one website, and it's harmonicamute.com, which is my Harp Wah site.
I'll link that up in the show notes so that people can see exactly how to get to it.
Yeah, and there's a main link now on the page about Roly's harmonica workshop or seminars. And there's not a ton of information at this point, but because this is a fairly new venture, but I'll be adding information there. There'll be something where you can actually sign up and learn more about it, and I'll have more details on it as time goes on. But definitely, if you're interested, I'm looking forward to this, because I love teaching and I love talking about, just like we're doing now, just explaining things that were, I've been playing for 45 years or so. You just learn certain things over the years of what works and what doesn't. And I'm not an expert. I don't call myself an expert in any field, but there's certain areas that I've got a good sense of right and wrong, I guess.
Well, I've been on the receiving end of lessons from Roly, and I can highly recommend attending these seminars when they go live, because he's got tons of knowledge, and you are an expert in your field. So I wouldn't undersell yourself.
Well, thank you.
Well, look, I really want to thank you for taking such a chunk of time out of your day to hang out with me. It's been really, really wonderful. And there are so many other things I want to talk to you about, so I might try and convince you to come back for a part 2 at some point.
We should talk about harmonica sometime.
We should, right? Well, this is why I pitched this as chat loosely revolving around harmonica. And
yeah.
I think we've been quite loose today, so that's cool.
No, it's good. It's nice to not be asked the typical questions and things, and just have a conversation about life.
Well, yeah. Cool. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and stay safe, and keep washing your hands and all that stuff. And anyone who wants to find out more about Roly, I will have written up some show notes that you can get links to his site and seminars, and get Inside Out. It's an amazing album. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tomlin. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tomlin's Harmonica Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Join me next Monday for the next episode. Happy harping!